How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, February 24th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I am going to do a quick rundown of the 2021 NBA All-Star rosters because the All-Star game is happening on March 4th in Atlanta, and the two captains are going to eventually draft their teammates because that's how the NBA All-Star game is. That's kind of how it's formatted. It's kind of the way it works. But I'm just going to give a quick rundown of the players that were selected into this year's All-Star game and give a little bit of context and background and just to give a bit of understanding as to why these players were selected into the All-Star game. And of course, there were notable omissions, but of course, I'll leave it at the end because usually how the All-Star game works is that someone will usually get injured on the East or the West, and they'll usually replace them with the players that many people believe were the biggest snubs, and I'll get into that as we go through each conference. So because the All-Star game is going to be played in Atlanta, I'm going to start with the West Coast Conference first. And in the Western Conference, the coach will be Quinn Snyder. He's going to be the head coach of Team LeBron because the Utah Jazz currently have the best record in the Western Conference, as they are 3 games ahead of the Clippers and 3.5 games ahead of the Lakers. And the Clippers and the Lakers are the two teams that going into the season were favored to come out of the West. The fact that many people weren't expecting the Jazz to be up here is a testament to how amazing and how well they've been coached and just how well they've played together as a team. So naturally, it makes sense that Quinn Snyder, the coach of the best team in the NBA, would be the head coach of the Western Conference. And of course, his captain will be LeBron James. Obviously, it makes sense. The goated small forward for the Los Angeles Lakers, who's now coming off of his 4th NBA title. This is going to be his 17th time making the All-Star game. I mean, I don't think he's missed a season except for his rookie season. He's virtually made the All-Star game in every single year that he's played. He is a 4-time NBA MVP and, of course, 3-time All-Star Game MVP. Currently this season averaging 25.8 points, 8.1 assists per game, and 8.2 rebounds on a team that's currently sitting 3rd in the West at 22-10. A very tough Western Conference, so naturally it makes sense. Alongside him, the starter selected, you'll see the GOATed starting point guard for the Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry, currently averaging 30.2 points, 6.2 assists, and 5.4 rebounds for a Warriors team that's currently sitting 8th in the West, considering he's the only player on that roster that even has an elite or even a GOATed profile, just to give you a sense of what he's doing on that team. With a lot of other stronger teams in the West, the fact that he was able to do so with the Warriors, it speaks to his elite level of play. This will be the 7th time he's been named to an All-Star, or he's been named to an All-Star game, and of course, many people are aware of his 3 championships, and he's a 2-time MVP. So we got that. Also alongside him, out of the Western Conference starters backcourt, you have Luka Doncic, the Slovenian 2-time. This will be the 2nd time that he's in the All-Star. It'll be the Slovenian elite guard currently playing for the Dallas Mavericks, a team that's currently sitting at about 15-15 as they are the 9th place. They are the 9th seed in the Western Conference, 1 game behind the Golden State Warriors on the outside looking in. And of course, he's the only player on that Dallas Mavericks roster that I believe has an elite profile. This season, he's currently averaging 28.9 points, 9.2 assists, and 8.6 rebounds per game. As this will be the 2nd time in a row he's been named an All-Star starter, and this being his 3rd season in the NBA. So of course, that speaks to how amazingly he's playing. Alongside him, being named to his 3rd All-Star game is Nicola Jokage, the elite Serbian center currently playing for the Denver Nuggets, to help lead the Nuggets to the Western Conference Finals last year. This year, he's currently averaging 27 points, 8.4 assists, and 10.9 rebounds on a Denver Nuggets team that's currently sitting 7th in the West at 17-14. And of course, Nikola Jokic, he was named to the All-NBA 2nd team last year and the 1st team the year before that, so many people are well aware as to how well this man is playing, and of course it makes sense with his level of play currently that he was elected to be a starter in the Western Conference. And then closing out the Western Conference will be, for making it to his 5th All-Star game in his career, will be Kawhi Leonard, the GOATed forward for the Los Angeles Clippers, the team that's currently sitting 2nd, in a very contested Western Conference, sitting at 23-10, 3 games behind the Utah Jazz and half a game ahead of the defending champs Los Angeles Lakers. This season, Kawhi Leonard's averaging 27.1 points, 6.2 rebounds, and 4.8 assists while helping the Clippers do so. And of course, it makes sense that he would round out the starters in doing that. So out of the starters, you have LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, Nicola Jokage, and Kawhi Leonard. And because the teams are kind of they're drafted by the captains, they're all more than likely not going to be on the same team. And then out of the Western Conference reserves, leading off the Western Conference reserves would be LeBron James's teammate, Anthony Davis. He will be making his 8th career NBA All-Star game after making the NBA first team last year and helping the Lakers win the championship. This season, he's currently averaging 22.5 points, 8.4 rebounds, and 3 assists, as he's currently dealing with injury. But he was still able to make it for his 8th time, and the Lakers are sitting 3rd in the West, and they have been kind of drooping in the past couple of games due to his absence. So just to give you a sense of just how amazing Anthony Davis is. Alongside him, another Los Angeles player, Paul George, was selected to his 7th career All-Star game. This season, he's currently averaging 24.6 points, 6.2 rebounds, and 5.4 assists, just to give you a sense of what he's doing. And the fact that he and Kawhi Leonard are helping the Los Angeles Clippers currently place 2nd in the West, it speaks to how it speaks to his impact on the team. Also, alongside them, you'll find Rudy Gobert, the elite French center for the Utah Jazz, who's making his 2nd career All-Star game. This season, he's averaging 14 points, 13.5 rebounds, and just over an assist per game after finishing on the All-NBA 3rd team last year. 2-time NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Of course, it makes sense. And the Utah Jazz are currently sitting with the best record in the West, and he's a very big part of that, so it makes sense. Also, alongside them is Damien Lillard, the elite starting guard for the Portland Trailblazers, who will be making his 6th career All-Star game after making the All-NBA 2nd team last year, currently averaging 29.6 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 8 assists on a Portland Trailblazers team that's currently sitting 6th in the West. So, yes, it makes sense that Damian Lillard, Dame Time, is on this team. Also alongside Dame Time is Donovan Mitchell, making it for his 2nd career All-Star game, averaging 24.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5 assists on the best team in the Western Conference, the team that currently has the best record in the NBA. So yes, you have to give Donovan Mitchell the tip of the hat, give the man his credit, and he is getting rewarded for his amazing first half of the season. Also, Chris Paul will be, outside of LeBron James, the most tenured player that'll be an all-star in the Western Conference will be Chris Paul, the elite starting point guard for the Phoenix Suns, who's currently averaging 16.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 8.5 assists, all while helping the Suns jump from a team that wasn't in the playoffs to being the 4th best team in the Western Conference. And of course, this is a player that's been named to the All-NBA first team 4 times. He was he was an All-Star Game MVP in 2013. And the fact that he's made over a decade's worth of All-Star games should speak to the level of play that he's played with and the level of consistency he's been able to maintain for his entire career. And to finish out the West, the only player that's making it for the very first time in his career will be Zion Williamson. The New Orleans Pelicans elite forward out of Duke. Go Duke. He's the only player representing Duke in the Western Conference, as of course Quinn Snyder is going to represent Duke as a coach. But nonetheless, this season, Zion Williamson, after almost being the Rookie of the Year last year, is currently averaging 25.1 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 3.1 assists on a Pelicans team that's currently not in the playoffs. But of course, it makes sense because, of course, the whole point of this is to make money, and Zion Williamson is going to sell a lot of tickets just by himself. And that's the Western Conference. Really looking out to the Eastern Conference because, of course, the Eastern Conference is going to host. The coach is going to be Doc Rivers, who's currently the head coach of the Eastern Conference, leading Philadelphia 76ers, who are leading the Brooklyn Nets by half a game. So, and Doc Rivers has won a championship back with the Boston Celtics, and he was, of course, very prominent with the Los Angeles Clippers. Of course, he's an amazing coach, and it makes sense as to why they would name Doc Rivers the captain. Or the coach. And he is going to be he's going to be the coach of Team Durant because Kevin Durant is the captain of the East Coast or of the Eastern Conference team. He's currently averaging 29 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 5.3 assists on a Brooklyn Nets team that's currently sitting second in the Eastern Conference, half a game behind the Philadelphia 76ers. And we all know how great Kevin Durant is. Alongside Chris Paul, he is the second most tenured All-Star in this game, as he has made 11 All-Star games himself. And don't forget, this man's a two-time Finals MVP, two-time All-Star MVP, and he did win the MVP back in, I want to say, 2016, 2015. Well, don't take my word for that, but he won the MVP back in OKC. So, of course, it makes sense that he is going to be named the All-Star captain because, of course, he's one of the best veterans in the history of the game, and he has a GOAT profile for a reason. Alongside him, that's starting in the game, you'll find Giannis Antetokounmpo, the reigning two-time MVP from the last two seasons and the Defensive Player of the Year from last year, who is currently averaging 28.6 points, 11.8 rebounds, and 6 assists on a Milwaukee Bucks team that's currently sitting third in the Eastern Conference, a game and a half behind the Brooklyn Nets, and 2 games behind the Philadelphia 76ers, so they're very well in that hunt as of right now. And this will be the 5th time that Giannis Antetokounmpo will be named to the All-Star game, just to give you a glimpse into this man's consistency. The second most tenured Eastern Conference All-Star out of their starters will be Kevin Durant's teammate, Kyrie Irving, and LeBron James' former teammate. Kyrie Irving is currently averaging 27.4 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 5.8 assists on a Brooklyn Nets team, like I said, that's second in the West by only half a game. This will be the 7th time he's made an All-Star game. He was on the second team in 2019, and he was the All-Star Game MVP in 2014. And, of course, I'm reading all this off of NBA.com, so, of course, thank you, NBA.com. But, of course, with all of this, Kyrie Irving, like I said, putting up an amazing season, so it would make sense as to why he was named a starter. He is going to share the backcourt with Bradley Beal, who is making the All-Star game for the 3rd time in his career. He's currently leading the NBA in scoring, averaging 32.7 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, and 4.9 assists. And also, he is playing for the team that has the 3rd worst record in the Eastern Conference. But, of course, Bradley Beal is the reason why they have a lot of those wins. And like I said, this will be the 3rd time he's been named an All-Star. So, of course, he's getting his recognition after averaging 30 points per game last year and still not being named. And then finishing out the Eastern Conference starters, you have Joel Embiid, the elite center for the Philadelphia 76ers out of Kansas, who is, of course, Doc Rivers' player, or one of the 2 76ers that made it, who's currently averaging 29.8 points, 11.3 rebounds, and 3.1 assists for a Sixers team that's currently leading the East. So, of course, it makes sense. And the fact that he was named for the 4th time, that should speak to how good Joel Embiid is as well. Those are the starters out of the Eastern Conference players. Jumping to the reserves. Out of the reserves, the most tenured player is James Harden, who will be making the All-Star game for the first time as a member of the Eastern Conference. He's averaging 25 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 11.2 assists, currently leading the league in assists per game on a Brooklyn Nets team that's second in the Eastern Conference, right behind the Sixers. I think the Nets are the only team in the NBA that have 3 All-Stars, and of course that makes sense because they are Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. And I would dispute that James Harden probably deserved the starting nod over Kyrie Irving, but the fact is that all 3 of them made the team, which should speak to how dominant and how good the Nets are looking, especially in terms of their star power. Continuing on, the second most tenured bench player for the Eastern Conference, believe it or not, is Ben Simmons, the elite starting point guard for the Philadelphia 76ers, who's currently averaging 15.7 points, 8.3 rebounds, and 7.3 assists. And this is the player that led the NBA in steals last season, so of course it makes sense. Great all-around individual player, and the fact that he's so young and he's just made his 3rd All-Star game should just speak to how well he's playing in the league. And of course, he's the starting point guard for the team that currently has the best record in the Eastern Conference, so yes, that makes sense. Also, outside of them, there are 2 players that are making it for their 2nd time in their career. First, Nikola Vucevic for the Orlando Magic, who's currently averaging the highest point per game total of his career, averaging 23.9 points per game, 11.7 rebounds, and 3.7 assists. The fact that he's making it for Orlando, that's a very big deal for him, and I think he definitely deserves his credit for what he's done with his team. The Orlando Magic are currently sitting with the fourth worst record, but Vucevic is doing all he can to hold it down, so that makes sense. And then also making his second career NBA All-Star appearance is Jason Tatum, the elite starting forward for the Boston Celtics out of Duke. Go Duke, naturally. And Jason Tatum currently averaging 26 points, 7.1 rebounds, and 4.6 assists for a Boston Celtics team that's currently sitting sixth in the East. And this is a player that's kind of seen this limelight from the very beginning, and he's a very young player. And the fact that he's been able to make it twice, it speaks to his potential and his ability to make this team just consistently just over the years. And then outside of them, for this Eastern Conference, all out of this roster, 3 players are making it for the very first times in their career. First, it's Jason Tatum's teammate, Jalen Brown, out of Cal, who's averaging 25.7 points, 5.6 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. He is making the All-Star team for the first time in his career because right now he's playing out of his mind right now, and of course they will give him the nod. They're in a playoff spot. It makes sense. Alongside him, Zach Levine, the starting shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls, is making his first All-Star game, as he is an All-Star weekend legend, first of all, for being a slam dunk champion and being one of the best dunkers this game has ever seen, especially within that competition. But this season, he's averaging 28.6 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 5.1 assists for a Chicago Bulls team that's currently in the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference. Like, he's really doing all he can with that Chicago Bulls team, and the fact that it's really kind of paying off. I think with all that he's been working for this season, averaging 28.6, I think was more than enough to give this man his nod to his first All-Star game. And then last but not least, Julius Randle is going to make his first All-Star game. He's currently averaging career highs in points and rebounds, averaging 23.3 points, 10.9 rebounds, and 5.5 assists. And the Knicks are currently in a playoff spot right now. They're sitting in the 7th spot in the Eastern Conference, and Julius Randle is doing all he can in that respect. He even dropped 40 points against the Hawks when he was really needed. So with Julius Randle, that rounds out the teams. And of course, naturally, a lot of NBA fans are disappointed because in the West, many would argue that Devin Booker deserves to make it, as Devin Booker is having a really amazing year. He's currently averaging 24.7 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 4.3 assists. And of course, because the Suns have the 4th best record in the Western Conference, and they did name Chris Paul, I mean, it leaves a lot of questions up in the air. And the reserves did come down to who the coaches selected. So at the end of the day, they chose not to pick him. But at the same time, Trae Young in the Eastern Conference is averaging 27 points, 9.6 assists, almost 10 assists a game, the most he's ever averaged in his career. But since the Hawks are sitting out of the playoff picture, and it makes sense, but at the same time, the All-Star game is in Atlanta, and the NBA All-Star voters have been known to give the nod to hometown players. But I guess the whole reality of the situation is that the game isn't here yet. It'll be in a couple weeks, and usually around this time, if like 1 or 2 players are injured, they usually will sub them in. And I think the first player that's going to come off, or the first player that's going to get called up to the West, will be Devin Booker, and the first player that will be called up in the East will be Trae Young. I have yet to see how that's going to shape out. But with that said, that's everything that's going on for the NBA roster. And of course, these rosters very well could change, and I will do another segment once right before the All-Star game, just to give a little bit of a preview. But with that said, I want to thank everyone once again for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and I will catch you tomorrow once all of tomorrow's exhibitions are finished on Thursday, February 25th, 2021. Thanks once again for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. I'll catch you tomorrow.